Hi. Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
We're ready. Okay. So we're kind of going to do things a little bit disorderly, but with a purpose in mind. So the first thing we're going to do so that we can get onto it is address how we're going to treat a bunch of tomatoes when we have all these tomatoes. You can see, right? Like, I think you can. Hold on.
Let me just,
We've got,
should we show our tomatoes?
yes,
All right, let me do that. Okay.
all kinds of different tomatoes. Some of them picked from our own garden, respective to different gardens, and some of it picked up at a store just to show different types. So the whole idea is that what we want to do today is to perhaps the best way to illustrate the principle of strategic cooking and how when you have lots of fresh ingredients from one particular harvest, whether it's a week or 2 months long, how you utilize them both for present, for a meal that's going to succeed whatever you're preparing, or for something that's going to be used in winter when there are no fresh tomatoes. Everybody knows about making tomato cookdown or tomato sauce. We'll deal with that too, but what we'll start with is to show you what we do when we have lots of different tomatoes. So let's take one which is a perfect example. This is an odd-shaped one. There's another odd-shaped one. So because they're so fresh, and I'm sure most of you like tomatoes a great deal, what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 or 3 slices from the best part. So we're going to actually cut, by the way, this is called the shoulders. The top of the tomato is the shoulder. So we're going to cut below the shoulders. And you see, these will look amazing on a plate just by themselves. So we're going to cut maybe 2 or 3 nice thick slices from this one. I'm not the best cutter, but these are nice. See, we'll leave this to the side. There's another tomato. We'll do the same thing, cut below the shoulders, try and do it in a straight line. See, you have that middle thing here, so maybe I'm going to do another cut. Because you want this sort of ripest and most palatable 2 slices out of the tomato, knowing that you're going to use the rest for other things. And I would just put these on. What I would do is I'd salt them, and that's going to be instead of a salad or part of a salad. And remember, coming back, we did our first meeting, I think we had stuff about paste. So if you had some cilantro, if you had some preserved some basil or arugula pesto in oil and garlic, you put some on top of that, and that's delicious in its own way. So now Vanya and I will proceed to do 2 other things, 2 separate things, I should say. One of us, Vanya, is going to cut up the cucumber for your ceviche, which if you have a cucumber, do the same thing. Cut them into, small cubes. Doesn't really matter.
Leave the seeds out.
Leave everything in. It's good. This is fresh, and we started to peel this one just to make it easier for us. But in many cases, you use it with the peel. So she'll do that. You see, I showed you earlier this piece here. It's not great for whatever it is, so I'll just cut it or cut that part off. And I'll cut along similar lines. I'll cut the same kind of size cubes like Vanya is cooking, and we're going to put it in the same in the same bowl together. Obviously, if you don't have help, you got to do everything on your own, but it's not that complicated. Just take pieces of this, pieces of the tomato. So remember, we now have set aside some tomatoes to eat. We're preparing some tomatoes for ceviche. And at the same time, well, not the same, but almost the same time, everything that wasn't like there's a little piece here that's maybe a little moldy, it's still a perfect tomato, almost perfect. You just take these, cut these pieces, and that's what's going to go into the cook down. And these tomatoes, which are not yet in as great abundance, these are called Roma tomatoes. You'll see them in bushels and baskets. Those are the ones that are the best to use for cooking down. So we will, in addition to the pieces that I've just cut to the side that are not going to be ceviche, any kind of odds and ends will go in for cooking. Today, they're going into cook down. Another time, what I would do, let's say there are more tomatoes next week, and I really wanted to get more because I want some for the winter, then trusted freezer bags will contain some of these pieces of tomatoes. I'll freeze them, and for the whole summer, every time I make a tomato salad, a ceviche, or anything with tomato, I'll use the parts that I use for the salad or for the ceviche, and the rest I'll put in a plastic bag that at some point when it's full or when there's a sale on Roma tomatoes, I will add some to the frozen ones in a pot and cook them down. Just salt and a few basil leaves. That's all it is. It's a cook down.
So you kind of accumulate, you're accumulating the tomatoes as they're in season, and they cost less when they're in season usually, and accumulating them. Or if you have a community garden and you accumulate them in the freezer until you have enough.
Right. And I'm gonna, so basically you've seen, and you can see right now, we've got some cucumbers. We'll cut a few. I'm gonna ask Vanya to cut a few more tomatoes. Again, cut this off. Yep. Make some cubes, and the rest all goes into the sauce. And again, because we're just trying to demonstrate, we've already started, we have a pot over there, and we have some cook down from last year. I'll show it to you. So we've got the jar. I poured some of the cooked down. Again, that's all it is tomatoes cooked down with a little bit of salt and basil thrown in. After they've been either defrosted, or if they're canned properly, they can stay in a can for like 9 months. I mean, in a mason jar for all that length of time. By straining them, you see, I've got this liquid and I've got the paste. The liquid, you see you can see that, and the paste remains on top. So I'm going to, in a second, take some of the liquid, put it in a saute pan, and start cooking the pasta right in the tomato water. Don't have to cook it otherwise. So,
yeah, I mean, and if we know this is kind of a last minute addition, but it's such a wonderful dish actually that we discovered it just recently. I've always had heard about pasta being cooked in the actual sauce, and so last week we tried it and it was delicious. So we've kind of added, if you don't have a tomato, that you cooked yourself, you can always also just one of the best ways of making tomato sauce, if you don't have fresh tomatoes, is to buy canned tomatoes and cook those down. So this is an example of tomatoes. These ones are from Italy, but that also will have the water in it, and then you can quickly cook down the whole tomatoes that are in there. Is this one pureed? No, these are the peeled tomatoes, which are
You
great.
can get peeled tomatoes, you
Or
can get
puree.
diced tomatoes, you can get
Yeah.
any kind of
But if you
stuff.
have that in your cupboard now and you want to try this, the same thing will apply. If you have jarred pureed tomato or canned pureed tomato, feel free to try along, even though it's a last minute addition. And you can do the same thing. Strain out the water because you're always going to have a watery component, and then the puree. And if you want to grab pasta, if you already have, the best kind is actually something thin, like something that cooks in 6-7 minutes, like spaghetti or spaghettini, the thinner spaghetti. So if you have that and you want to try to cook along with us, by all means, grab that.
And now, as I said, we've got that. That's the cucumbers and the tomato bits. I'm going to cut some onion, and we're going to put the onion separately for just a little while in some salt, just to denature them a little differently. We don't
Before
want
adding them.
Yeah, we don't want the juice from the onions in the ceviche. Well, at least I don't. So
And why is that? It gets too oniony?
Yeah, I find it's too strong. Plus, it doesn't agree with me. But it is when you have the onion.
So maybe we'll put it here then.
Yeah, we'll just put some salt. So if you've got your onion, just cut some onion. You don't have to, the term is bleed. You don't have to bleed the peppers. Peppers are cool.
What about, do we add salt to the ceviche now?
Yes, absolutely. That's the next step. So that's gonna bleed in here, but we don't mind some of that juice. We don't want the juice. Well, as I said, most people will find it perhaps a little too strong. So this way we have the option of adding the onion that is a little denatured. That's, I think, the term for it. So I'm going to put some salt on that. You want to bring the, for 1 second, the can over there. I'll show you what we're doing. So we'll be going back and forth, but take your pasta. See, water is getting warm. I just break the pasta because it's easier and put it right into, and remember, you notice it's not a pot, it's a skillet or a deep, whatever, frying pan.
Yeah.
And we're going to add a little salt to the water because remember, this is just tomato with very little. And you cook it now just in the tomato water a little bit. The water will evaporate, and then we will continue to add water. It'll take about, I would say, maybe 15 minutes. We didn't use a stopwatch last time, but it should be in 10, 12 minutes, you can start tasting. And then you'll also add some sauce, whether it's your sauce that you've made or cooked on or from a can. You do the same thing with a can, by the way. I always use the sieve strainer to get the liquid out, the most liquid out, so you end up with a paste, because you want the paste to be the last thing that covers the tomatoes. Also, the spaghetti. And don't forget, the spaghetti is drinking, and that's what it's doing in a pot with water. It's drinking the water. It's more difficult to drink paste than it is pure liquid.
Can you add the rest? Because it's yummy.
Yes. Oh my God. It even smells good.
I want to have all of it.
Yeah, and it smells great too.
Yeah. Here, I've got one hand.
No, okay. We'll just do that. Just
add it in like that?
No.
What?
We won't add it at all. We just.
Why not? I want all of it.
Okay, she wants all of it. I love it. Because she remembered, we had it on Friday.
We didn't think we would have the whole thing last time, and we just couldn't stop eating it.
Yeah, it was really good. It's truly a different experience than covering cooked pasta or putting cooked pasta into a sauce. Literally, it's integrated, and we thought it was fabulous, and you will too. And that's, by the way, the simplest. And again, this is where the idea of strategic cooking comes back to us, because on top of that spaghetti that's cooking in the water, which I'll have to return to, we are going to have so many options. You can add some basil pesto that you made now, or again, in my freezer, there's always some basil or arugula pesto in summer for sure, so that I can add it to any number of things. And you'll have a tomato pasta that accepts whether it's roasted garlic, basil, arugula, parsley, anything you want to add just a little bit of color and flavor. That's what you'll find most efficient.
With the pasta cooked directly in the tomato sauce, I had a romantic notion that it was probably discovered when somebody was on a camping trip or something, and the water was taking too long to boil, or maybe there wasn't safe water to drink, and they thought, you know what? Let's just try cooking. We have the tomato sauce. Let's try cooking it in here.
Yeah, remember
that's my romantic notion. I feel like that's how it was discovered. But
now it wasn't. What should I say? It wasn't on the menu or a shopping list, but we happen to have an avocado. But again, to show you, this is an avocado that I already had to cut some parts off, but it's beautiful. We'll just score it in kind of like the same size cubes, and Bunny's going to finish because I'm going to have to go to the water and just add some water.
Sure. Add that to the tomato ceviche.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, you can see it almost sticks, and that's okay. They tell you that that's okay because it's absorbing everything. But now I'm putting on some more liquid. This is not the paste. This is liquid with the paste. I'm going to take this out. That's the basil from the...
Yeah, so what happens is the edges kind of get crunchy, but it's such a good thing. It's kind of like the corners of a lasagna.
Exactly.
And it's very pleasant. Very different from boiled pasta.
Yes. Maybe I can lower the heat just a tiny bit, please. Yeah, and you can see, by the way, how it's already they're already bending. They're already being cooked, and soon they'll be ready to eat. At the same time, the salt is doing its thing. While the heat's doing its thing over here, the salt is doing its thing for the ceviche. Basically, for a package of pasta, 1 can or 1 jar should be enough. It's good if you have a little extra just in case, but 1 jar, 1 can, and now it's cooking. Okay. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to add the we're getting the avocado ready to add, and here's where we have to consider what else could we do, like to put in. Well, to begin with, Vanya is going to next show you what we do with the pepper. We have enough. We have enough tomato for the ceviche.
Okay.
The rest, remember, the rest is going to go in a bag. All of this stuff here is going in a bag into a freezer because we already had sauce. We didn't want us to. Yeah, we can do that. That's going to go in a bag, and maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks the bag will be full, and we'll decide to do it. And
so with the pepper, I mean, if you just look at the shape of the pepper, it naturally has wedges, kind of like boat shapes. So, and the other way to use it would be kind of like cutting it this way and getting a cup. For our purposes, we were thinking, let's do a callback on something we did earlier with the peas and paste. And maybe we might think for this pepper, that I'm going to cut it into these boat-shaped wedges and maybe use, this is just the frozen jar of the pea paste we had made weeks ago. And if I fill these little boat wedges with the pea paste, I've already got something that I can throw into the oven, maybe add some kind of protein to it, like sunflower seeds or other kinds of seeds, hemp seeds.
Or cheese.
And then you've got a nice little meal going. Or, so there we go, we've got this nice little shape. Also, we can just use the pepper wedge like this as, you know, a taco. So you can make a vegetable taco and fill this with whatever you'd like, a salsa, avocado as well. If you have some beans, whatever it is you'd like to put in your vegetable taco, quinoa. So there we have that kind of shape with this pepper.
And then with the rest, we're gonna cube some parts to go into ceviche. So
Right,
we'll
so
take,
for that, I might
yeah.
cut the pepper this way. And then maybe use these shoulders for what? What would you use those for? Maybe the ceviche?
Yeah, I cut them up for the ceviche and keep the other ones, or cut them all. And I'll do, again, if you're into multicolor, we've got green, we've got yellow. I'm gonna focus on trying to not forget the pasta. And the other thing is that I wanted to take a minute to talk about this thing in general. As I said at the beginning, I think this is a perfect, tomatoes are absolutely perfect to demonstrate the principles of strategic cooking, okay? So we've dealt here with the two primary outcomes of today's session. Number one, we got some great tomatoes that we're going to eat at dinner. Number two, we're making this ceviche, which, by the way, would be either good for tonight or keep it for tomorrow, you know, no problem. Perfect. Then we're also, the third one is we're cooking the pasta. We're cooking down tomatoes, but as it is today, we're demonstrating how to use the cook down. So what I'm saying is that we've got all these tomatoes, more than what we need for tonight. And whether you have the same or just have a few, you can always take a few pieces, put them on the side and keep them. They're the ones that typically wonder, what am I going to do? How do I eat around that stuff? You don't. You just put them in a plastic bag, freeze them, and a few weeks later, you'll come back to them. Once we've done what we said, the cubed and the odd pieces, we're going to freeze, and we think in terms of what are we going to be able to use it for next time? That's the whole idea, because while we're doing this, and we're making dinner right now, we're making three, in fact, well, two dishes and some sliced tomatoes. We're also thinking about what we can do. And again, we've brought in the pea and broccoli paste. Maybe you've got some basil pesto left over, and we incorporate what we had last time into what we're preparing right now.
This
And
also would
that's the
be
whole
lovely
idea.
as a little kind of, you know, vegetable cup. If you have your salsa the next night and your
You can do that.
peppers and you're doing this, and you've got a lovely little, yeah.
And with tacos. And by the way, on the list it said something about corn niblets. Great, why not? If you have some corn, you add that to the pasta. If you have, I'm trying to think of something else that I would add. Sometimes I add
You mean
beets.
to the pasta or to
No,
the?
I'm sorry, I meant to the ceviche.
Yeah.
So you can add corn niblets. You can add pieces of beets, either cooked beets or pickled beets. You can add what I do later on, and we will have a session that focuses on beans. Soon there are going to be lots of beans, but you can use canned beans or beans that you soaked in water from the night before and you cook them. You add beans to the ceviche. You can add corn, you can add beans, everything that you do that you would put into a salad. Some people might like to put sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds. That's ceviche, which, by the way, I failed to mention earlier. The original and the whatever prototypical ceviche is with fish. It's a South American and Spanish dish that incorporates all of these things and fish. But we're talking about vegetarian ceviche, which of course can become a pescatarian one once you decide to add some pieces of fish that have been marinated. And for that, all you need is go on the web. There's 30 or 40 sites that'll tell you what to do with the fish, either totally raw or seared, and it's an incredible meal. And I think Vanya's been there. It's pretty good. It's almost ready.
Yeah, it's almost ready. It's getting quite soft now.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Do you want the poblano pepper in this as well?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
So you see here, you can see now, look how the pasta is all soft now. There's not, well, there's a couple of hard ones. You're always going to have it. But even the ones that are hard, that are crunchy, that's like super al dente. You see, it's all soft.
Very pleasant.
And
the crunchiness is pleasant.
This is truly, and think about it. Took what, 15 minutes?
Yeah.
No boiling, which you would have had to do boiling and make sauce and whatever. All you got to do is do this. By the way,
it's an energy saver and a pot.
Yes.
Pot washing saver because it's just the one pot.
Everything's safe. And what you can also do with that pasta, just as you will with the ceviche, which I'm going to put in right now, are some hot peppers. You can always chop, or what I actually like to do, unless I just pick the pepper and it's really crunchy, is I like to put them in the freezer and then grate them in on a micro. Maybe you have one.
I do. I have some
and not only that, but you have some frozen peppers. So I'll show you what I do. And you can do that with the pasta too. You can always chop the pasta. You can always chop the peppers, not the pasta. You can always chop the peppers, cube peppers, depending how hot you like them or not.
They're my frozen peppers. They're quite frozen, but frosty in there. But they've been in there for over a year, and they're still always great.
And for that, I'm going to now teach all of you as well as Vanya something. Peppers.
Did I make a mistake?
No, not made a mistake. You said no. The peppers are best frozen in a basket, not in plastic.
A basket?
Yes,
what do you mean?
like when you get like when you buy your strawberries or cherry tomatoes in one of these plastic baskets.
They have holes in them. That's okay.
Yes, doesn't matter. You put them in, they freeze. You want them not to be enclosed. And I didn't make it up. I learned that somewhere. So I'll take this pepper and I'll just grate some of it into the ceviche.
I love learning.
When you're freezing it, do you need to wrap it up at all, or you just leave it in? Like, I'm imagining like a plastic strawberry
loose
pints, right?
Yes, it can even be in those, those cardboard, not cardboard, the mashed paper that's reconstituted.
That's okay.
Those green things that you buy them in.
Right.
The main thing is not in plastic. Again,
you mean not in a bag?
Not in a bag, not in a bag. Well, if plastic, yes, as long as it's got lots of holes in it. The idea is not to, it's the opposite, and it's counterintuitive, I know. It's the opposite of everything else that you put in, but in a freezer. Everything, remember I told you a couple of times on a couple of sessions that as long as you cover it with oil, so no air gets into it, it's going to last a long time. Well, maybe that's the answer. Peppers have
their own
an inherent
skin,
skin and oil. The what's it called? The spicy part. I can't say
capsaicin or whatever it is.
Capsaicin is to some degree oily. And for some reason, again, I picked it up a few years ago. It's better to just let them be loose, loose in a basket or someplace, in a little container, which is where I keep them. And I've kept them for a year, and that's fine. Anyway, so now we've done that.
I'll add the...
Yeah, we'll add the avocado. You guys go ahead. You want to add, like, you might have some beans. The whole idea, remember what we spoke about earlier, the idea is that every session that you cook, so if I'm going to cook beans, which I will very soon because they're fresh, I will cook some beans maybe 50% or double what I would cook for my one use. And the rest I'll just put in the cooking water and maybe a little oil on top and put it in the fridge. I may also freeze some, but again, we'll talk about next time. But the idea is I would now have had a jar or a half a jar of beans I would have added to the ceviche if I weren't using seafood, which we're not. So
for protein, yeah.
Yeah, so right now, by the way, another thing that I find is both obviously nutritious, but also adds some flavor is if you use some hemp seeds, or if you like flax, any of these nutritious protein-laden grains or seeds. Quinoa has to be cooked, the flax doesn't, and I can't come up with the other one that I use a lot, but I also will use wheat berries and farro, which are grains of the cereal,
too,
and they need to be cooked. But again, if I cook some farro or if I cook some wheat berries, which you can find anywhere and they're quite reasonable, you cook them down in some stock, you have them for your meal, whether it's with mushrooms, tomato, whatever it is that you have, but always make sure you have extra, because the next time you come across some fresh produce, you can make yourself a nice ceviche. And by the way, this ceviche is just about ready. All we need now is, where's the lemon? We'll squeeze some lemon into it. Lime, of course, is good. And we'll chop some cilantro. If you don't have cilantro, chop some parsley into it. We have both, so we'll do both. And by the way, you can also make a ceviche that's basil based. Any one of these sort of fresh, soft herbs. I wouldn't use, for example, I wouldn't use rosemary or sage or thyme in a ceviche, but I would use any one of parsley, basil, or basil, depending what you have in the store, and cilantro. So now I've got this, and again, as I said, if you have lime, use lime. Eventually, what you're going to have to do is what I'm doing now. I'm going to taste for salt. So I'll take a spoon and just take a little bit, because this is when you adjust it.
Honey?
Already.
Well, Allan.
Why don't we open?
We have a question.
Good, because I was going to
Yes,
ask.
I've got my chopped up onion here, which I put on a fair bit of salt.
Yes.
It doesn't seem to be exuding much water, though.
Okay. Well,
What do I do now?
It might take a little longer, but there is a solution that I use almost always, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a fan of raw onion. So if I can't do that, by the way, you do it with lots of salt, because eventually you're going to rinse them or just get rid of the juice. But there are two things you can do. Number one is In fact, my favorite thing is to boil a little bit of water, tiny bit, well, a cup. Boil a cup of water, pour it over the onion, let it steep for 1 minute, strain out the water, and that's perfect. So it's like no more than a minute's detour. The other thing is, but again, beautiful. Thank you for that question, because it makes me think of another aspect of strategic cooking. So yesterday I made an omelet, and I made an omelet or whatever, some eggs with onions. But I knew that I was going to use the onion in a different fashion. So I made more onion than I wanted. Before I fried, I took a little bit aside and I let it steep overnight in salt and lime, because I know that either tomorrow or the next, and by the way, it'll last for a week in your fridge, if it's salted and limey or lemony. And then you've got kind of pickled, but definitely denatured onions. So they're not as strong, they're not as offensive, and they won't give you bad breath either.
So I was going to add that what my mother does with onion is she puts it in vinegar.
Yeah.
That's the way that, they denature it, which is also pleasant, that kind of pickled onion. And it's really amazing how much more digestible it is. But I really like the idea of the lime or the lemon a bit better.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, though, and her mother is Italian, so she knows her stuff. But even Italians haven't picked up on the benefits of lime. Lime is better.
Yeah.
Salt and lime. And now I will boil it. I don't think I have to show you. That's the one thing I wanted to get back to is we don't want to be, well, we can't be. We're not pros, but look at how beautiful this is.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I'm sure yours is beautiful too.
And that's without any additional, like, remember, you can add the corn, the beans, grains, whatever, for more nutritious, almost a one bowl vegetarian, or as I said, with fish. But I wanted to come back to the one thing that I do not want to forget before we have more discussion. And that is, what we're trying to do is not have a cooking show. This is not, we can't compete with the stuff like that's on TV. We're not pros. We don't
I can't be Nigella Lawson.
No.
I always wanted to be Nigella Lawson.
Well, you look a little bit like her. I definitely don't. In any event, so what we want is to talk about thinking, talk about ideas, what will both inspire you and get you to be more creative. You don't remember, by the way, today, did we use any measurements? Did we use any weights? Nothing. All we did was put some stuff together. Remember, good stuff going in, you have some idea of the proportion. Obviously, we're not going to use, look, this is all this stuff that's here. All we're going to use is this little bit of onion. We're not going to use double the onion that we do tomato. Anybody can figure that out, unless you want onion ceviche, which is cool. So I'd like, at this point, having shown you the pasta, remember the little pieces of tomatoes cooked down. I don't have to show you how to put a whole bunch of tomato pieces, tiny bit of water at the very bottom so it doesn't stick, and let it cook for a while. Big deal. Anybody can do that, and I don't have to show you how to make dishes. But what I do want to do is to get you to think in terms of, what can I do today while I'm cooking for next time? And I'm going to stop and ask any of you to contribute either a question or an idea. Please. Like this,
while we're reading, I had a thought. So
yes,
you have all these little, kind of pieces of tomato, and I think you intended these to be part of the cook down, right?
Yes.
These are the Roma. We didn't have enough for a cook down because they're not really all in season yet. So I guess at that point you put them in your Ziploc bag, and throw them in the freezer.
That's all I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I I grow tomatoes. I have too many tomatoes.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to do with them. Well, I do. What I do is I sometimes take whole tomatoes or just cut them in half, put them in the freezer bag. Whenever I know I'm not going to be able to use them, that's what I do.
And even just like these little
ultimately,
ends, trim away
yes,
all
I just
the-
trim away the crap and put it in the freezer bag. Absolutely.
I find it handy when freezing. I find it handy when freezing tomatoes that I cut around where the stem is.
Absolutely.
Throw
Absolutely.
that away.
Yes.
And then when I use them, you can just run it under cold water and slip the skin off with your thumb.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah.
That's a very good idea.
Wow, that's
good.
nice.
I'm just going to boil water for a second.
So that's great. When they're frozen, they come out, that skin just comes off easily. The hot cold.
So does anybody have any questions? Just so
I have a question about the pasta. I'm testing that out right now, and I'm finding it sticking to the bottom a little bit. It might be, I think I changed it a little bit from yours, where I think yours is mostly water as a base, and then you put the more of a paste on top. I think I had started with a paste and mixed some water into it.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm finding it sticking to the bottom a little bit. Is there a reason why that may be, or?
Yes. The reason is that you didn't, well, it could happen later, but the primary reason is that the paste gets thicker much quicker. But the sticky parts, if you look up, I can't tell you exactly, but look up cooking pasta in tomato, and you will see that, in fact, they applaud the possibility that some pasta will stick. You don't want it all sticking, but that's part of the beauty of it. Okay. So what I did is, first of all, I brought the water to some, well, to a boil almost, and then I put the pasta in, and then I let it start just with the tomato water. If you have a can, again, drain it like I suggested earlier, and you can add a little water. You know, just make sure that for the first 4 or 5 minutes, maybe you stir it a little bit and let the water get, as I said earlier, let the pasta drink the water, because it's more difficult for the pasta to drink the paste. That's why it sticks to the bottom, because of the heat. Also, you have to regulate the level of heat, medium, high, and it's like everything else. This time, maybe you grade yourself 75% successful. Next time, you'll be 90% successful.
But honestly, the crunchiness and the sticking to the bottom and what that does to the pasta, once you eat it, I found it to be really pleasant. It tastes so good.
Number one thing is the taste. So here, I had a little water. I'm going to put it on top. I'm going to put the water on top of the onion. Not that I needed to show it to you, but since we're going to eat this, might as well do it. So there it is. And by the time I go back, put the water back and get other things ready, and maybe another question, it's going to be ready.
It's already ready. I did not know this trick at all.
Oh, this is really good. And by the way, the onions remain crunchy. They're not going to be soft and mushy. Onions are tough enough. They'll be able to do that. And remember, with the pasta, again, anything, if you have, and I'll encourage you next time, perhaps even we'll make a note of it in advance of the next show, so you could, and that I think would be a great idea, if people who are here today and will join us in 2 weeks, perhaps you can have something that you will have set aside, something that's either partially or fully prepared, that can be incorporated into the next preparation, because that's the whole idea. Make the most out of your time in the kitchen, not just for flavor, but be efficient. So that's it.
Strain that off.
Yeah. So it's strained, no water, put it in, mix it in, there you
Mix
go.
it in. I just want to taste one just to see. Yeah, still crunchy. Mhm.
And
It does taste different, right? It
Yeah, it's
doesn't
a
have
little-
that sharpness.
yeah.
It doesn't have that bite back of a raw onion.
But it is onion,
It is
unmistakably.
onion, yeah.
In other words, you do
But
not lose the
mild.
taste. Yeah,
It's
mild.
like mild onion taste.
Exactly. So
Very
even
nice.
even people who, you know, are mildly intolerant of onion or just don't think it's the greatest thing, if you put that in either lime and salt overnight, or failing that, a little bit of boiling water, we're cool the whole time. And yeah, I'm still trying to encourage, unsuccessfully apparently, some more questions or some ideas. Did anybody have an idea like what they want to do with the ceviche, or something that you want to put on the pasta because you don't want to have just tomato? By the way, obviously grated cheese, you don't get any marks for that.
Okay, I have two questions.
Awesome.
I have peeled a whole pile of garlic cloves, getting ready. And I am just itching to squeeze a few through the garlic press and put them in the vegetable mixture. Would that
Perfect.
do?
It would.
And what about
It's well, let me answer the first question. It would be fine if that's what you want. It's not, I don't know, it's not in the bloodlines of a ceviche. You know, it is not something that's typical. If you do, let's say, I would say a half, at maximum 1 clove of garlic that gets incorporated, that's great, but don't overload it. On the other hand, that garlic that you have, if you, at the very end, because it's fresh garlic, right? I mean, you just picked it or bought it somewhere. Okay, that garlic is totally unlike, as we spoke about, I think a couple of weeks ago or 4, totally unlike what you buy in the store. You take some of that, and just before your pasta is ready, you squeeze some in. So it'll kind of cook almost like the onion, cook for a minute. And the remaining warmth or heat of the pasta will incorporate it and will kind of, again, a tiny bit denature it. I wouldn't do that with Chinese or, you know, store-bought Mexican garlic, because it's weeks old, too powerful, and that treatment will not make it more palatable. But the fresh garlic, you could almost eat raw anyways. For people who get it, you know, just chop a few pieces into the lime or lemon, as we did with the onion, and some salt. You could put it in a salad afterwards and eat literally little slivers of garlic, because they will have been treated somewhere between pickled and cooked by the salt and lemon or lime. Or vinegar for salad. If you prefer a vinegary salad, I do that. That's another thing. If I'm gonna, like, for example, again, thank you for that. And I know I'm gonna come back to your second question, which, by the way, I forgot, but I knew you had 2. If I were going to use garlic today from your garlic press, okay? So here's what I do. I would take the pieces that you're going to press, put them in your garlic press. I wouldn't even, by the way, I might not even peel them perfectly. I just take off the top and the bottom and squeeze, you know, maybe a bit of that. Use what you want in the ceviche or in the pasta, and then take whatever is left in your press, upside down in a little dish, put some lemon, put some salt, put some vinegar in it. Tomorrow, the best start for a salad dressing. So again, you've used basically the stuff that you would throw away, leftover ends, whatever.
Yeah, because you never know what to do with those leftover bits from the
Just
garlic
take
press.
the whole thing from the garlic press. Maybe sometimes what I've done is I take the garlic press itself and I put it in stainless steel or a glass bowl, and I cover it with, like I said, any acidic medium. I think it was it last time, or anyways, the time before when we did the roasted garlic,
Right.
barbecue. So remember, I showed you how to cut the top. So you just get your knife around the top of the head so that each piece, each clove is cut and maybe even scored a little to receive the oil and the salt. Well, the parts that you cut off the top, I always take them, put some salt on them, put some lime or lemon, and let them sit around for a day or two. So there's always something to do with every part, just like with the leftover of the pepper, we used some for the boats because we might want to do that tomorrow or the next day and they'll keep, or we use in a ceviche, and the rest, again, this goes in the freezer. It can go into a beautiful stir fry, exactly. Stir fry, vegetable ragu, every little piece. And the other thing, again, in times of plenty, you get these baskets of peppers. You use them 2 or 3 different ways. Guess what the rest is? They marry amazingly well, and maybe we'll come back to that next time. They marry very well with tomato. I've made for me, some of the best sauces with just sweet pepper, tomato, garlic, the usual herbs, and maybe a little spice. Really good, like a pepper sauce, but with some tomato. Again, using the leftovers. So what was the second question?
About the olive oil.
Okay, repeat it, please.
Should I put some olive oil on the ceviche?
No, it's not. Ceviche does not have oil. However, again, very good question. You stimulated another part of my brain. I have done the same thing as ceviche, the same kind of stuff that you're doing right now. Instead of ceviche, I call it more like cut. Yeah, salsa. Well, but that's again in that area, salsa, but like a cut version of gazpacho. So all these vegetables that you used here, okay? And instead of going heavy on lime and cilantro, I would use a little bit of hot pepper. I would use basil and parsley, not cilantro, and make it a Mediterranean kind of salad. So yes, definitely I put oil and I let that become a totally different treatment of the same raw material.
That's more like a bruschetta topping.
Yes.
It becomes,
exactly.
the tomato and the basil. Yeah.
And sometimes you just do it with tomatoes alone. You cut up some tomatoes. There's a part, I think it is with a printout or whatever was sent to you. We haven't touched on that briefly. We can sometime soon, maybe already now, certainly in Niagara, there will be an abundance of cherry tomatoes where you could buy a basket for $1 or $2 or something like that. And there are, for me, they're one of the best parts of summer, cherry tomatoes are. And you can eat them. Obviously, you pop them in your mouth and they're great.
They're also extremely easy to freeze. And you literally just wash them and put them on a tray and put them in the freezer and they individually freeze. And then you can put them in a Ziploc bag. I've done that.
Yeah.
And then it's so easy to just throw them into like a pasta dish, a stir fry, whatever.
Yes, exactly. So again, you have different steps on the way from absolutely fresh, you don't want to do anything else, to ones that may be a little withered or whatever. You can put them in a frying pan and cook something right away. You can freeze them, as Vanya said. And the other thing that I like to do, if we have, I think, do we have time? Yeah, we have a little time. So I'll tell you what I do. I'll take a basket of cherry tomatoes. I'll cut them in half. I'll put them in, I'll put salt on top of them, and I put them on a cookie sheet, and I put them in the oven at 200 degrees, 220, and just leave them for 2 hours, depending on the heat and what you want to do. You could watch it after 20 minutes if you put it at 250 degrees. You can keep it for 3 hours or longer if you put it at 180 degrees. The most important thing is watch it every once in a while. And you take it out, put them in a jar. Obviously, you'll be tempted and you will eat some of them.
Yeah.
They're the most, basically, they focus and concentrate the taste of the cherry tomato. So what I do with them is I put them in a jar, put a piece of garlic somewhere in the middle while they're still warm, and cover them in an oil. And I leave them for maybe a day. For half a day, I'll leave them on the counter. Then I'll leave them a day in the fridge. If I don't use them, because remember, there's lots of cherry tomatoes available, I will freeze. I always have 3 or 4 jars of roasted or barbecued. If you're barbecuing something, do the same thing. You're watching your barbecue, watch your cherry tomatoes as well, or put it in afterwards. Turn off the heat. It concentrates the flavor. Put them in a jar, piece of garlic, a leaf or 3 of basil, and make sure oil covers them and there's enough space for it to expand, and freeze them. There's nothing, well, for me, hardly anything as rewarding as going into the fridge in January and pulling out one of these jars with the concentrated flavor of tomato and using them on all kinds of things, whether it's an omelet, a cherry melt, or a pasta with some roasted garlic, roasted tomatoes. Again, something that you use in the height of season and set aside without hardly any additional effort, and you'll love it in the winter, right up until March. In fact, I can tell you that on the weekend, I just extracted my last jar of roasted cherry tomatoes just before starting to make my next season's one. And it's the same thing with the sauce that we just used. We had some of Vanya's mother tomato sauce that was from last year. So you can enjoy tomato from the height of its deliciousness for the next 8 or 9 months. No problem.
I have a question about paste and the tomato thing. You have me thinking about how that lasted for a year. Did you like boil can it to pasteurize it, or how long does something like that last in the fridge if it's if it's not being boiled?
Okay, I'm going.
Like, I know from the pastes or things like that, like the vegetables.
Yeah, I understand the question. I would say very sort of an overview would be, number one, obviously the sauce is cooked. It's cooked down, so it's hot. What I do typically is I wait for some of it to cool completely, even in the fridge, then cover it with a bit of oil, again, leaving a space on top for it, and I freeze it. So I have a couple of jars frozen. But if you're into making a bunch more and you want to just can them, yes, you will have to boil both the jar and, even more importantly, the tops. And then there's a way that they vacuum seal, and I will not tell you because I don't know the full details and I don't want to set you wrong, but you can look that up. 2 minutes flat. Basically, you make sure everything is boiled and you leave it, and you can hear within an hour or so, you'll hear a pop because a vacuum is formed because of the heat and air, whatever's happening there, and it literally seals it. So when you want to open it, you're going to need a a beer can or a glass, what's it called? Not cork, cap, a cap, like a cap remover. You need to use that tool in order to remove the top of the mason jar, because it's the rubber seal has come down and is totally vacuum sealed, and that you can leave in your pantry for 6-8 months, no problem.
Is that what you meant, Lindsay? Or were you talking about the paste from herbs that are fresh?
I think both, either or.
Yeah.
I
So
think
if you do like the cilantro paste with the olive oil on top, how long does that last in your fridge?
I would,
Or
in the
freezer?
fridge, it would last for a week, no problem. If you
Freezer?
put some heat on. I want to go back though. That's the one thing I typically, unless it's with even with hot pepper, because I use a lot of cilantro, hot pepper, salt mix, because that's great on so many things. I would typically use sunflower oil, not olive oil, with that. Okay, I always use olive oil if I'm making parsley, arugula, or basil, and those they'll freeze for, get little jars. Or the other technique to do it is get yourself, if you don't already have, some of these rubber
The silicone
ice cube trays. You fill them with the stuff, let it freeze. When it's frozen, take them out. You can even use 2 or 3 separate preparations in separate cubes, and then take the cubes, put them in, once they're frozen, put them in a Ziploc bag or a reused bag where you bought some other stuff like corn niblets or frozen peas. I always have a few of these, or as I said, jars, little
Like
jars, jams. Yeah,
But how long did they last? Like, so how long?
a year, easy.
A year, and then also in the freezer with the oil on top. If you do it that way, a year. Yeah.
Easy,
Okay.
easy. I can tell
1 week
you,
in the fridge, a year in the freezer.
and I can again with oil, and I can tell you that I've used them without an ounce of exaggeration. I've used them 2 years later. Nothing, because remember, oil prevents any kind of degradation, especially when it's frozen. And it's the same thing with roasted garlic. If you have somehow you didn't use it from last year's frozen roasted garlic, guess what? 2 years later, a year and a half later, still fine.
Oh, okay, I gotta go.
All right, great. Nice to see you.
Bye.
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 I'm going to go too, I think.
All
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope you have some more questions and bring them up in an email.
I know who he's channeling chef-wise.
Who?
Anthony Bourdain.
I am?
Like, yeah, today with the arms out and everything, right?
It's hot. Oh, it's hot. Anthony Bourdain. I don't have his wit, and I don't plan to commit suicide soon. But other than that, it's a nice thought. Thanks. Anyway, see you in 2 weeks.
Bye,
Okay, have a
everyone.
nice evening.
Thanks. See you in 2
Bye.
weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.